Hi, this is Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And today, I want to give you some ideas on getting your music heard by people. And I want to break it down for you because there's really only 4 ways to get anyone to listen to or notice your music. You want more streams? There's 4 ways to get them. You want more people to buy your records? There's 4 ways to make that happen. You want more people to come to your live shows? There's 4 ways to make that happen. You want more people to watch your YouTube videos? There's basically 4 ways to make that happen. There are 4 ways to get other people, actual real live people, to listen to and potentially care about and enjoy your music. Bold claim? I don't think so. I think by the end of this podcast episode, you're going to agree, wait a second, there are only 4 ways for me to get other people to listen to my music, and maybe I should do more of those. All right, spoiler alert, arguably there's a 5th one. We'll get into that. You let me know in the comments down below if you think that I missed any. But I don't think that you're going to think that I missed any. I think we're going to cover it all right here, right now. This is a free podcast episode. The reason it's totally free is because we have stuff that's not free. So if you ever want a course on learning stuff around music production, we got a course on mixing breakthroughs. You can check it out over at mixingbreakthroughs.com. It'll change the way that you mix forever for the better. We got a whole course on learning to really understand and use compression in your mix called Compression Breakthroughs. You can check that out. Again, money back guarantee. Or we've got a whole course on mastering called Mastering Demystified, where you will learn everything that I know about mastering to get you started in mastering. Check it out, masteringdemystified.com. Of course, you don't need to buy those courses or anything else to get the hundreds upon hundreds of free videos and podcast episodes on this channel, but they're out there if you want them. Because this is a podcast, there's also sponsors. I'll tell you more about them later, but in brief, we got GPU Audio sponsoring this week. They're actually giving away a free reverb to anyone who wants it. Free limited time early access at gpu.audio/SonicScoop. That's gpu.audio/SonicScoop for free early access to a great sounding convolution reverb plugin. Check it out. Also, if you want to get 10% off of any of my favorite plugins from iZotope, get anything they make for 10% off at iZotope.com/SonicScoop, or try out anything that Soundtoys makes for free over at soundtoys.com, some of my favorite creative mixing effects. But more about those guys later. Let's talk right now about how to get your music heard, the 4 ways to do it. And we'll start with maybe worst and go up to best. And in a way, when I say these things, they're going to feel a little obvious to you, but they're also going to boil things down to where you're like, okay, out of these 4 things, I'm only doing 1, and maybe that's why I'm not getting heard as much as I want. And maybe I've got to ramp up my efforts in the other 3. Or maybe you'll find that you're missing one of these ingredients. If you're doing really well, you're missing only one of these. But most people that I've noticed out there are like only doing one of these 4 things, and they're wondering, why aren't people hearing my music? Why aren't I selling more records or getting more streams or getting more subscribers? And it's because you're not doing all of the 4 things. So anyway, let's start with the worst one, and that's advertising. One way to get more people to hear your music is advertising, paid advertising marketing, where you're literally putting up YouTube ads and Facebook ads and Google ads, or buying an ad in your local alternative weekly newspaper. Do those still exist? Those existed when I was younger. I don't think they even exist anymore, or some digital variation thereof. Now, I say it's the worst, but that doesn't mean because it's horrible. I actually know some people who've gotten impressive numbers of YouTube video views or some surprisingly good numbers of streams through advertising. Now, the potential issue there is the advertising usually costs them more money than the streams generated, than the YouTube views generated, than any record sales that they got off of that advertising generated. So more often than not, when it comes to selling songs or increasing streams, the advertising model in music is usually not that sustainable. Unless you're doing other things that allow you to capture the ability to follow up with these potential fans later on and convert them to people who actually do give you more in return than it costs to advertise to them. But if you just want to get like numbers up on some of your Spotify streams or numbers up on some of your YouTube views, advertising actually can do that. Whether it actually earns you any money or has any significant benefit, that is potentially questionable unless you get all of your other follow-up right. I'm not going to say it's potentially questionable. It is questionable. It's unlikely unless you get your additional follow-up right. But this can be some type of paid advertising, part of a larger strategy of growing your music career. But it can't be the only thing. If this is the only thing that you're doing, it's probably not going to work. All right, thing number 2 that a lot of people start to think about when they're like, man, no one's hearing my stuff. Do I just need to go and pay someone so more people hear my stuff? Is going to publicists. And publicists or PR people are generally going to be able to help you amplify what you're already doing. Maybe some of the better ones will help you come up with a more holistic strategy. But usually what they're going to do is help you interact with the press. So this one, number 2, is not just publicists, but it's press, I would call it. Because what publicists are really helping you do is interact with the press and get press. You don't necessarily need a paid publicist or a PR person to do this, although it can help, and it especially can help at scale. Like if you're starting to become more and more successful in this stuff, you don't have all this time to devote to the press side of things, hiring a PR agency to help you with press can definitely be useful. Is it the best place to spend money if you're really new in your career and you're just putting out your first release? Well, a lot of that depends on how much money you have to spend, how much money you're willing to throw away, whether you're playing a long game or a short game and this kind of stuff. But publicists, PR people, or just going to the press directly can be useful, can be helpful. But this is still the second worst way to get people to hear your music. And I'll tell you, there are some artists I know who've gotten good press, where I've seen they've come out with a release, they've clearly had a PR team who really helped that release get written about in a lot of places. They end up doing some interviews or getting press coverage in the right places. And then I've looked up like how many records they've actually sold on Nielsen SoundScan, that kind of thing. And it's like, not that many. And it's like, wow, you sold 1,500 copies. You're actually a fairly known name. I've heard of you before, and there's 1,500 copies of your record that have been sold, even though you've been mentioned in all of these big press outlets. Wow. Sometimes being mentioned in the press or even being a name that people know of does not yield directly record sales or people hearing about your music. Now, to be fair, some of those notable artists may have other strategies. Their careers may be driven by something other than record sales. But just know that getting written about in all the right places isn't necessarily going to yield you a whole megaton of streams or a whole megaton of record sales. That's not necessarily how it works. But again, as part of a larger strategy that incorporates some of these other things we're going to get to, it can be something that adds on and helps. Absolutely. You don't necessarily need a publicist or a press release agency to do this stuff for you. You can potentially reach out to blogs and people who curate playlists and people who have YouTube channels where they interview artists or have artists do guest live performances on their channel. There's so many potential options out there, but just know that's only one of the 4 planks, number 2 in this case. All right, this leads us to way to get your music heard, number 3. And there's a tiny bit of overlap in number 3 with number 1 and 2. There's actually a tiny bit of overlap in a way with all of these. But number 3 is creating content. And I don't just mean you made your single or you made your album. I really mean for number 3, supporting content. Content that supports the primary content you made. So some type of secondary content that is helping to promote your main content that you're trying to get people's ears on. And this can take so many forms. If your main product is the album or is the single, then there is the option of having things like supporting music videos, right? That's one obvious thing. But in a way, you can consider the music video a product in and of itself that may generate you some streaming revenue. And that is maybe becomes the major thing that you're also trying to get people to hear. So what's the content supporting that content? So now you have not only your major content, the song, but a music video that supports that. And now what's the content supporting the music video? And so on and so on. I guess the whole general idea here is that making records today, it's not the 1970s. It's not about recording your magnum opus album and then getting it into the stores and then getting mentioned enough in the right newspapers and magazines and radio stations that people go out and buy it. That's not exactly how it works. It's your job to create a stream of content or be part of like this ongoing river of content that people can dip their toes in. It means making a life of continuously creating music. It means not just creating one thing that you present to the world and then sitting on your laurels and hope everybody experiences that one thing. It's about contributing to this overall river of music or making your own stream of music that people can kind of dip into and dip out of. So there has to be kind of ongoing content. And you can also think about some of your content as being not the main dish, but supporting content. So this could look like guest collaborations with other artists. What if another artist has a YouTube channel and you can cross-pollinate audiences with them? What if they can directly expose you to their audience and you can directly expose them to your audience? So this crossover and collaboration, I think, is a big part of this kind of content strategy. And maybe that one deserves its own separate entry. So maybe this should be a list of 5 rather than 4 ways, because maybe you're going to say that special type of content creation is so important, collaborating with other artists, that it deserves its own entry. But right now, I'm going to put it under that idea of general content, because that's not the only kind of content. You could have a YouTube channel or an Instagram page where you put up covers of other artists' songs that may gain even more traction and notoriety than your own originals, but then drive traffic back to your originals. Or you do the kind of rough and raw recordings of your own songs. And maybe it's like the minute-long Instagram rendition of your song. That's just one instrument, acoustic guitar or piano and vocals, that's going to make people be more interested in hearing the full song. Because maybe this is a clip that's 15 seconds or 30 seconds or 1 minute long. And maybe it's done in a very kind of stripped down way. Or maybe you're just doing it very off the cuff in a very unusual locale. Or maybe you're doing it on totally weird instrumentation. You're doing a 15 or 30 second rearrangement of your song using nothing but, kitchen utensils. Like there's so many different things you can do to create interesting supporting content that attracts people to what's the quote unquote main content. And the more you do that kind of thing, the more you'll discover that that kind of thing is an art in and of itself. And is potentially just as important, if not more so, than your album or your perfectly crafted single. And to some people, that's actually the more valuable art that you're doing. And there's the art that integrates even more into their lives, or it's the art that makes them go, oh, that person's interesting. They have creative ideas. I wonder what else is happening in their music. So definitely think about that. Content itself, alternative forms of content, being a way to get people to check out the main dish. So that's super important to recognize. And I've done actually full podcast episodes on this idea. A great one to check out is one I did recently, an interview with an artist who is a mastering client of mine named Josh Turner, who has a YouTube channel, who's taken so many of the kinds of strategies I've just mentioned under number 3 and has turned that into a YouTube channel that gets millions of views per month and allows him to make a living in music, making the kind of music he wants to make. Definitely check out that podcast episode if you haven't. But this leads me to number 4, where I think is the absolute best way to get more people to hear and listen to your music. One of my mastering clients just got gold record certification. It was so cool. I saw him put up, I forget if it was on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, he put up his gold record plaque that came in the mail, and he was excited to have it, and I was super excited for him. Totally deserved. This is an artist named Yokelore, who I've mastered a couple records for, and one of his singles just went gold. Congrats to him. Hats off. Is absolutely awesome single called Beige. You should totally listen to it. I'll link to it here. I think the YouTube video of it has something like 5 million views on it, something in that neighborhood. And he's got the gold record to show for his success with that release and how much it resonated with other people. And I wrote to him saying, hey man, congrats. This is so awesome. So excited that the record went gold. And he wrote back to say, oh, that's so sweet of you. Thanks for all the great work. And he said, it turns out that if you just make good music and go out and play it for as many people as possible, it pays off. And this is so incredibly true. Getting in front of people and playing them your music. And what his response here really brought up in my mind is so many of the successful artists who I've met or worked with or who I know were the backbone of building their fan base, the backbone of building their record sales, the backbone of building their career and their income in music came off of getting out there physically to new places and playing their songs again and again for new audiences, particularly if you can in the context of live performances. So many artists have had the most resonance with people because they've literally gotten into a room with other human beings and played them music in real time and touched them so deeply that those people had this electric emotional experience of live good music in front of them, of a performer getting lost in the performance and not caring for a moment who's looking at them, but just kind of, bearing open their soul and being vulnerable in the ways that musicians can be and showing their kind of mastery and their art in front of people and the craft that they've put into this to make something that's so beautiful seem so effortless, or to make it feel so important, so resonant that when people experience that, usually in a live setting, those are the people who become your evangelists, the ones who go out there and say, you've got to hear this artist. I just saw them live the other day and it was amazing. And now I'm listening to their music all the time and I'm playing it for all of my other friends. And the next time they come into town, I'm trying to bring 3 or 4 or 5 of my friends to go with me to the show. This is the kind of thing that really births word of mouth to a really significant degree, is getting out there and playing music in front of people. And ideally, I think the most powerful version of that is doing it live and in person really well. There's also the possibility of doing it in more virtual ways today, and that can absolutely work too. Getting guest performance spots on TV shows or, YouTube channels or particular websites, doing live streams, all of that stuff can be beneficial. But especially with the whole world opening back up again to physical in-person experiences, I really recommend making that a priority in what you do, because that's where you're going to touch people the deepest. That's where you're going to resonate with them the most. And that's where you're going to win the most lifelong fans who will never forget you. So there they are, the 4 ways to actually get people to hear your music. They are, to some degree, advertising, sure. There is press and publicity, sure. But there is content, supporting content for your main content. And this can include collaboration with other artists. And then there's the live performance and getting out there into venues, ideally in-person venues, and ideally in many different places in the world, and not just in your hometown, going out to some other town. Often that's big. That's something you've got to add to the live experience. Because if you live in, San Francisco or New York or LA, and you're like, we're playing a show tonight, it's like, yeah, so are like 8 of my other friends. Who cares? But you go to like some smaller market, some smaller city in Indiana or Maryland, and you play a show there, and then like, hey, there's a cool band from LA or New York coming. We should go see them. It's like all of a sudden a totally different thing. Because it's not that thing of like, yeah, 8 of my friends are playing. How many different shows am I supposed to go on to on a weeknight? Why am I even friends with you if I have to go and show up to your damn concert? Whereas you go somewhere else and all of a sudden it's like the most novel, cool thing when you go to one of those smaller markets. And vice versa. If you come from a smaller market, trying to get into some of those larger markets and visit them and connect with more artists and potential collaborators in those markets, absolutely a huge thing. And for a lot of artists today, building up the live side is where much more of their actual revenue comes from than the other side of just creating content to be consumed. Now, there are things you can do to enhance these. One of the big tips I want to give you around number 1 and number 2, the advertising and the marketing angle of things, is make sure that you're capturing people's email addresses, because an advertising campaign, a press campaign, that happens one time, you do the spend, you get the exposure, and it's gone. But if you can tie into that some reason for them to take another step, to visit you on your website and sign up for your email mailing list. I do not mean liking and following you on Facebook or following you on Twitter or following you on Instagram, where some other company controls the algorithm and whether or not you're going to get exposed. And now you have to pay even more to get yourself re-exposed to the people who already liked you in the past. Nah, you should have that stuff, sure. But it's for the birds compared to setting up some landing page on your website that gives people a real compelling reason to enter their email address so that when you do new stuff or when you're playing a show near them, you can let them know about it in their email. That is so much better than just doing some advertising and hoping to get a stream or a like or a follow, or doing some press and hoping to get a view or a like or a follow. So think about compelling ways. What are you going to give them to get their email address so that you can follow up and give them even more? Well, I hope this one has been useful for you. Let me know in the comments down below, or shoot me an email at podcast@sonicscoop.com to tell me, which of these 4 things have you been doing? Which ones have you been good at? And which ones do you know you are lacking in? Because really, if you look at artists at the highest level, they're usually doing all 4 of these. Those artists who are successful have at least a little bit of all 4 of these, or at least 3, let's say, and usually all 4. So which ones are you doing? Which ones are you not? Be honest. Let us know in the comments down below, or let us know just as a fan, which of these 4 things have you noticed that some of your favorite artists have been doing that really helped them attract your attention and your devotion and interest? Let us know about that in the comments down below as well. Be super psyched to hear from you. Well, if you got this far in this podcast episode, apparently that means you don't mind hearing me talk for a while, which is totally weird, but it also means that you would probably totally like some of my full-length courses, like Mixing Breakthroughs, that will teach you to mix forever for the better, guaranteed, or your money back. It has changed the music production lives of thousands of students who've taken it. It will help your finishing rate go way up, your time to complete mixes go way down, while your creativity and confidence go way up. Check it out, mixingbreakthroughs.com. Or if you want to learn everything I know about mastering, you can check out that full-length course over at masteringdemystified.com. Money back guarantee on that one too. And compression breakthroughs. If you really want to get a handle on hearing, understanding, and using compression better than ever before, Compression Breakthroughs is the course for you. Check it out over at compressionbreakthroughs.com. I know you're going to love it. If you want some totally free stuff instead, I got you covered there too. This week's sponsors, GPU Audio, are giving away a convolution reverb powered by the GPU inside of your computer. You may be aware that your computer has a CPU in it that stands for Central Processing Unit, I think, but it also has a GPU, Graphic Processing Unit. Unless you're playing crazy complex video games or doing hardcore Bitcoin mining while you're mixing, that GPU of yours is an untapped, extremely powerful resource that could be used to power awesome sounding plugins like a totally free convolution reverb with practically 0 latency that you can get right now for free over at gpu.audio/SonicScoop. That's gpu.audio/SonicScoop for limited time early access to their convolution reverb totally for free. Or if you want 10% off some of the proven best plugins out there from iZotope, you can check them out at izotope.com/SonicScoop. That's izotope.com/SonicScoop for 10% off anything they make, or a 30-day free trial instead of the usual 7-day free trial to their Music Production Suite Pro bundle. Speaking of 30 days, one of my favorite plugin companies ever, Soundtoys, has been sponsoring this podcast from the beginning, and you can try out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Some of the most fun to use creative mixing effects out there. They sound great and are going to lead you in some totally new and totally great sounding directions. Check them out at soundtoys.com. Thanks for hanging out with me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. This has been Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. See you next time.